Behind the leather jackets, roaring engines, and apocalyptic chaos, these are secrets so weird they'll make you look at George Miller's dystopia in a whole new way. Near-death stunts, casting choices that defied logic. These 20 weird facts are guaranteed to blow your mind. Number 1. Real bikers played Toecutter's gang. Forget hiring stuntmen, George Miller went straight to the source. To play Toecutter's gang, he hired a real-life motorcycle club called the Vigilantes. These weren't actors pretending to ride. They lived and breathed it. Actor Tim Burns said they all wanted to ride as fast as possible, as often as possible, and their skills were off the charts. Stuntman Dale Bensch, also a vigilante, remembered a wild moment on a bridge. They'd wet the surface to make stunts easier, but Bensch hung onto his bike too long, it flipped him over. No one was seriously hurt, but the scene ended up looking insane on screen. These real bikers brought raw energy, danger, and unpredictability that no trained actor could replicate. Number 2. George Miller was a full-on medical doctor. Before George Miller was the mastermind behind Mad Max, he was a full-on medical doctor. And he spent his days treating car crash victims. Seriously. And that experience? It completely shaped the movie. All that insane, bone-crunching action you see on screen, Miller had seen what it looked like in real life, and he brought that raw, chaotic energy straight into his film. Every twisted car, every high-speed chase, every moment that makes you flinch isn't just for show. It's the guy who knows exactly what happens when metal hits flesh. Basically, Miller turned real-life carnage into cinematic adrenaline and somehow made it feel almost fun. A doctor of chaos indeed. Number 3. The Vigilantes got paid in beer. The biker gang in Mad Max, known as the Vigilantes, didn't get a normal paycheck. Instead, many of them were paid in what Australians call a slab, a full case of 24 beers. Imagine being part of one of the most iconic gangs in film history and your reward is a cooler full of cold ones. But for these guys, it was perfect. Most of them were locals, used to the outback lifestyle, and a case of beer went a long way. And honestly, it kind of fits the chaotic, scrappy energy of the film. These weren't polished actors. They were real people, living rough, riding fast, and having fun. So while it wasn't money in the bank, it gave them what they wanted: freedom, booze, and a legendary place in cinematic history. The Vigilantes might have fueled up on beer, but George Miller was running on something much stronger: sheer grit. On the next fact, we move from bikers trading horsepower for cold ones to a young doctor trading his weekends in the ER for just enough cash to keep his movie alive. Number 4. Miller worked ER shifts to keep the movie alive. George Miller didn't just direct Mad Max, he moonlighted as an emergency room doctor to make it happen. With a tiny budget to work with, and when they ran out of money for editing and post-production, Miller spent a year cutting the film in his kitchen while his producer, Byron Kennedy, handled the sound. On weekends, Miller returned to the ER to earn enough to keep the project alive. He even recruited friends and friends of friends to help, terrified that the film would never come together. His medical background didn't just fund the movie, it inspired it. Max Rokitansky's name comes from Karl von Rokitansky, a pathologist famous for inventing an autopsy method. So every high-speed crash, every twisted body, and every tense moment carries a bit of Miller's real-world experience treating trauma, making the movie feel dangerously authentic. Number 5. The post-apocalypse was a budget hack. Mad Max wasn't supposed to take place in a post-apocalyptic wasteland. George Miller just wanted to make a gritty Australian action movie. But his budget was tiny, only 350,000 Australian dollars to make the whole film. That's barely enough to buy a couple of cars, so he got creative. Empty roads, abandoned buildings, dusty deserts. They became the perfect world for Max to tear through. What started as a limitation turned into one of the most iconic settings in film history. The barren landscapes, the sense of isolation, the chaos on the roads. It all came from having almost nothing to work with, and somehow, it made the movie feel bigger, bleaker, and way more intense than anyone expected. Number 6. Mad Max inspired the Saw movies. You might not connect Mad Max to modern horror, but it planted a seed for one of the scariest franchises ever, Saw. That infamous ending scene, where Johnny the Boy is forced to saw off his own foot to survive, isn't just shocking, it's the blueprint for the extreme survival horror we see in the Saw movies. The idea of putting someone in a desperate, impossible situation and watching how far they'll go, that came straight from Miller's Desert Chaos, and the intensity feels even more real because the actors are reacting to real danger, not CGI. In a way, you could say the Saw films owe their gruesome creativity to a dusty, post-apocalyptic Australian road. Without Mad Max, the cinematic torture games we know today might never have existed, and we'd be missing one of the wildest legacies of horror cinema. Mad Max may have inspired Saw's twisted games of survival, but behind the scenes, fate was playing its own gamble. On the next fact, we shift from cinematic torture devices to a real-life bar fight that left one actor bruised, battered, and one step closer to becoming the face of an entire franchise. Number 7. How Mel Gibson landed Max. Mel Gibson's own story about getting the role of Max is wild. He claimed he first showed up to the audition bruised and battered from a bar fight. According to him, the filmmakers invited him back weeks later because they were looking for freaks. When he returned, healed and looking sharp, he got the lead. Sounds like a classic underdog story, right? Except everyone else at the audition remembers it differently. They say Gibson immediately looked like leading man material from the moment he walked in. No bruises required. Whether Gibson's version is true or just a good story, it stuck. And let's be real, he nailed it. That mix of grit, charm, and danger became Max Rokitansky, the face of a post-apocalyptic icon, and the movie might have felt completely different if someone else had walked in that day. Number 8. Gibson's classes delayed production. Believe it or not, Mad Max almost didn't start on time because of Mel Gibson's school schedule. Gibson was studying at Australia's National Institute of Dramatic Art, and his professors weren't about to let him skip classes early for a movie, no matter how promising it looked. This resulted in production being pushed back a couple of times while Miller and the crew waited for him to be free. It's wild to think a tiny scheduling issue could have delayed one of the most iconic action films of all time. But in the end, Gibson's training probably helped him bring depth to Max, even in a high-octane, chaotic film. That month-long wait might have frustrated the crew, but it didn't stop them from creating the tense, thrilling, dusty world we still remember today. Sometimes even legends have to obey the school bell. Number 9. The main force patrol cars were recycled police vehicles. The main force patrol cars you see in Mad Max look like a whole fleet, but there were actually only 3. Each one was a V8-equipped Ford Falcon sedan, and all 3 had previously been real Australian police cars. George Miller and the crew got clever with their small number, moving them around between shots so it appeared the MFP had an entire squadron. Those bright red, yellow, and blue cars became instantly iconic, racing through the dusty outback and adding a punch of color against the barren landscape. It's a little trick of filmmaking genius. What feels like a huge, intimidating police presence was really just 3 carefully positioned vehicles. And those Fords weren't just for show, they packed enough power to make Max's high-speed chases feel dangerously real. Number 10. Max's leather jacket was the real deal. Of all the costumes in Mad Max, only Mel Gibson's outfit was real leather. The rest of the gang? Vinyl. Cheaper, yes, but also fragile. Vinyl ripped easily, so the costume team was constantly sewing and patching throughout production. That meant behind-the-scenes chaos. Every stunt or chase risked tearing a jacket or pants, and the crew had to be ready with needles and thread at all times. Gibson's leather jacket, on the other hand, was tough enough to survive the crashes, dust, and relentless action. It helped Max look like he belonged in a world where survival meant toughness, grit, and style. And it became one of the most iconic jackets in film history. While vinyl costumes came and went, Gibson's leather became a symbol of Max himself, durable, dangerous, and unforgettable. If you're loving these insane Mad Max behind-the-scenes stories, speed to the like button and comment below which fact shocked you the most so far. And don't forget to subscribe, because we're just getting started, things are about to get even wilder, and you won't want to miss the next insane stunts and secrets from the Outback. Number 11. Mad Max was made guerrilla style. Mad Max wasn't just a low-budget movie, it was basically made on the run. George Miller had no permits because, as he put it, there was no one to go to really get a permit. That meant the crew had to shoot in guerrilla style, moving fast and keeping the chaos under control. But here's the shocking part. The police actually helped. They took an interest in the film and would sometimes block traffic so the production could safely shoot high-speed chases on real roads. It was a strange mix of lawless filmmaking with law enforcement on their side, cars screaming through the Outback, stunts flying left and right, and a team working without formal permissions. It all added to the raw, real energy of the movie. Mad Max felt alive, dangerous, and impossible, because it pretty much was. Number 12. Knight Rider's car had a naval booster rocket. One of the most insane moments in Mad Max is Knight Rider's car shooting flames down the road. That fire didn't come from any special effect. It came from a real naval booster rocket. The rocket produced 6,500 pounds of thrust in just 1.8 seconds, and it sent the car flying 400 meters off course. Everyone on set thought the shot was ruined. The car had gone way farther than planned, and chaos erupted as the crew scrambled. But when they reviewed the footage, it was perfect. That split second of danger, chaos, and fire became one of the most iconic action shots in the movie. It tells you that in a movie like Mad Max, sometimes real-world danger turned into cinematic gold. Knight Rider's rocket-powered chaos was risky, unpredictable, and unforgettable. Number 13. Some countries couldn't handle Toecutter's violence. One of the most shocking scenes in Mad Max shows Toecutter's gang chasing an innocent couple and tearing apart their car. The violence is raw, fast, and completely unforgiving. It was so intense that some countries actually edited it out, saying it was too graphic for audiences. Watching it today, it's easy to see why. It's chaotic, brutal, and makes your stomach twist. That scene perfectly captures the lawless, ruthless world Miller created, a place where danger is constant and the line between life and death is razor thin. Cutting it in some countries didn't take away the tension, it just proved how far ahead of its time the movie was. Even decades later, the scene still shocks, making audiences squirm and reminding us that Mad Max wasn't just an action movie, it was a hard-hitting punch to the gut. Some countries thought Toecutter's brutality was too much, but sometimes the smallest details leave the biggest mark. On the next fact, we go from a scene that was almost too real to handle to a severed hand that cost just $5 and a piece of pork from the butcher. Number 14. Kundalini's hand was a $5 prop. One of the weirdest props in Mad Max had a surprisingly cheap origin. Kundalini's hand, the one Jesse finds hanging from the back of the family station wagon, wasn't some elaborate special effect. It was a $5 novelty hand from a shop. To make it even stranger, the crew attached a piece of raw pork to it to lure a dog into the scene. That's right, a tiny bit of meat made the dog act naturally, adding tension and chaos to the shot. It's a perfect example of Miller's guerrilla filmmaking, working with what you have, making it look real, and somehow turning $5 and a scrap of pork into a moment that still sticks with viewers decades later. Cheap, clever, and undeniably creepy. Number 15. Miller was so dissatisfied with the film. When Mad Max wrapped, director George Miller wasn't basking in pride, he was overwhelmed with doubt. Instead of celebrating his debut feature, he admitted that he couldn't even bring himself to watch the completed film. The production had been grueling, a shoestring budget, a largely inexperienced crew, and countless corners cut just to keep the cameras rolling. By the end, Miller was so exhausted and critical of his own work that all he could see were the flaws. He thought the pacing was off, the editing too rough, and the overall result far below his vision. Ironically, audiences around the world embraced the film, proving that Miller's harsh self-criticism was misplaced. What he considered a rough, imperfect first attempt went on to become a box office sensation and launched one of the most iconic action franchises of all time. Number 16. Max's injuries were mostly fake. Kind of. Some of the most shocking injuries Max takes weren't Mel Gibson's at all. The close-up of Max's knee getting shot? That was actually the knee of special effects expert Chris Murray, and the scene where Max's arm gets run over by a motorcycle. That wasn't Gibson either, it was stunt coordinator Grant Page's arm. Page even cut a hole in the asphalt so the bike could roll over safely without hurting him. It's a mix of clever trickery and daring stunts that makes these moments feel terrifyingly real. Watching them, you can't help but wince because it looks like Max is taking some serious punishment. Behind the scenes, it was all carefully planned, but in true Mad Max style, it still feels just a little too close to real danger. Max's injuries may have been faked, but the danger on set was anything but. On the next fact, we move from carefully staged pain to a stunt so risky, it sparked rumors that a biker was killed during filming. The truth? It was a near miss that looked all too real. Number 17. A near miss on the bridge. Mad Max is packed with stunts that make your stomach drop, and some of them almost went horribly wrong. One of the most famous near disasters involved Dale Bensch, a member of the Vigilantes, during the bridge chase. Rumors even said a stuntman died, but Bensch clarified it was him and he survived. The scariest part? Dropping the bike on the bridge. The crew had removed the speedometer and tachometer to avoid more damage, and they wet the surface to make it a little safer. Bensch hung on too long, the bike flipped, and it looked worse than anyone expected. But when they watched the footage, it was perfect. A high-stakes moment that made the scene unforgettable. It's a reminder that behind every pulse-pounding stunt, there's real danger, and a team willing to stare down danger. Number 18. Mad Max was banned in some countries. Mad Max didn't just shock audiences, it got banned in some countries. In New Zealand, the scene where Jim Goose burns alive in his car hit too close to home. A similar accident had happened there shortly before the film's release, and authorities weren't having it. The movie stayed banned until 1983, after Mad Max 2. Road Warrior became a hit and proved audiences could handle the chaos. Sweden also said, "No way," citing the movie's extreme violence as too much for viewers. And yet, despite or maybe because of these bans, the film gained a cult reputation worldwide. People wanted to see the movie everyone was talking about but couldn't. It's a reminder of how Mad Max pushed boundaries, daring, intense, and so raw that some countries literally said, "You can't show this here." Number 19. Mad Max struggled in the US. Worldwide, Mad Max was a huge hit, raking in around $92 million, a massive success for a tiny-budget Australian film. But in the US, it stumbled, earning just $8 million. One big reason? The American release overdubbed the Australian actors with American accents. For audiences, it felt weird and off-putting. Mel Gibson's tough, gritty performance lost some of its edge when filtered through another voice. It wasn't until 2001, 22 years after the original release, that US audiences finally got to hear the actors' real voices, and the film clicked the way it was meant to. Despite the early struggles, the movie's style, stunts, and raw energy couldn't be denied. Even with a slow start in America, Mad Max cemented itself as a cult classic and a blueprint for high-octane, post-apocalyptic action cinema that still inspires filmmakers today, and for the moment you've all been waiting for. Number 20. The semi-truck had a metal shield. One of the most iconic moments in Mad Max involves the semi-truck that takes out Toecutter, but there's a clever behind-the-scenes trick you probably never noticed. The trucker wasn't about to let a motorcycle ruin his vehicle for just $50, so the front of the semi was covered with a giant metal plate. On that plate, the crew painted a grille and lights to make it look like the real truck. The truck survived, the scene looked deadly, and everyone got what they wanted. That metal plate didn't just protect the truck, it made the stunt safer while keeping the intensity off the charts. It's the kind of practical, clever filmmaking that defines Mad Max. High risk, high reward, and unforgettable. A perfect ending to a film full of chaos. Bonus fact: Max was a man of very few words. You might think the star of a movie talks a lot, but not in Mad Max. Mel Gibson, who plays Max, had only 16 lines of dialogue in the entire film. Actually, you could even argue 15 because 2 of those lines are basically the same. "I only came for the gasoline." That's it. For a leading man with so much screen time, that's almost nothing. And yet, it works perfectly. Max doesn't need words to command attention. His presence, his stunts, his leather jacket, and that intense stare say everything for him. It's a brilliant reminder that sometimes being seen is far more powerful than being heard. Gibson's silence adds to the world's tension, the desolate feel of the outback, and makes every action he takes hit harder. Few words, massive impact. And that's a wrap on Mad Max. From a tiny $350,000 budget to real bikers, rocket-powered cars, and stunts that could have gone horribly wrong, this movie wasn't just an action film. It was a chaotic, raw masterpiece. George Miller's medical background, Gibson's silent intensity, and a crew willing to take risks created a world that still feels alive today. Every car chase, every explosion, every brutal moment had a story behind it. So next time you watch Max tear through the outback, remember, behind the chaos is creativity, courage, and a whole lot of guts. That's Mad Max. Want to hear more stories of scrappy filmmaking? Wait until you see what's coming up next.
Wow, that was weird.